and I am the Director of Publications and Research here at uMbre Movement Jamaica. uMbre stands for Understanding Male Biases and Redefining Expectations. And we just want to thank you once more for being here. We had taken a break from our bi-weekly fora, and so we're happy to resume. And this week, we will be looking at males and the education system. So we are going to be delving into how the system treat males, how do males interact to the system and with the system, and we're going to be talking about academic performance as well as something that is topical at this moment, the grooming. Since we resumed school face-to-face, there have been reports of issues with grooming, and so we want to touch on these issues this evening. But to help us do that, we have our panelists, and so we have some competent people to share on the matter this evening. Our first panelist is Javon Leng, and Javon is currently pursuing a Bachelor of Science degree in Computer Science and Mathematics at the University of the West Indies, Mona. He's from the parish of St. Mary, where he represented as the 2021 National Youth Parliamentarian for the Western constituency. At the last sitting, he's a past student of the Monroe College, where he was very vocal with regard to advocacy and leadership. He also served on the National Secondary Students Council. He's an avid believer in community involvement, and so that caused him to occupy some leadership roles while back at Monroe. Thank you so much, Javon, and welcome. Our next panelist is also from the University of the West Indies. Sandrine Morris is a third-year law student. She is a tenacious youth leader who is committed to representing youths at the highest levels. She currently serves as a youth parliamentarian. She is the UA Stat Deputy Vice President of Disaster Mitigation and Climate Change, and a Kiwanian who is attached to the Kiwanis Club of Young Professionals, Western Jamaica. She's the immediate past youth mayor of St. James and the former youth councillor for the Montego Bay Southeast Division. She's an active member within the New Testament Church of God and a musician who specializes in the saxophone. And she is a proud past student of the Mount Alvernia High School and the Montego Bay Community College, both located in St. James. Ms. Morris, welcome also, and thank you for being here. Our next panelist is Audley Fair, who is an educator who hails from the parish of Westmoreland, but studied in St. Elizabeth and currently resides in Manchester. He's been traveling. He attended the Savannah Lamar Primary School, and after his grade 6 achievement test, GSAT, he went to the Manning School. He then studied at the Bethlehem Moravian College in Santa Cruz, the School Hills of Santa Cruz, and he currently teaches business education at Monroe College. So he specializes in principles of business and accounts, and he also teaches entrepreneurship at the Cape level. He always knew he wanted to become a teacher as early as 14 years old, and he has served quite a bit in different educational positions, even as public relations officer for the Jamaica Teachers Association in the St. Elizabeth Southeast, hope I have that correct, district, and a lot of other stuff. And so we want to thank Mr. Fair for being here. And then we have Amorcard Brown, who is an educator, and Mr. Brown is also the sixth form coordinator at Monroe College, and he is also involved in politics. He is a councillor candidate for one of the divisions there in Westmoreland. So we have a good lineup of panelists to share in this evening's topic. So welcome to all of you, and we still have time to share the link. This is man's business, but of course, our females are welcome to participate. So really, you can share the link. I'm going to also invite my social media team to post the YouTube link in the chat so that those of us who are here, we can also share that link in the event that some people cannot connect on Zoom. And wherever you're joining us from, I see Jamaica is here. I see France is here. And I also believe that the Cayman Islands is represented as well. So thank you so much. My panelists, could you turn on your camera? It's time for us to go to you. And we are going to start with academic performance. We're back into school, and thankfully, we're back into face-to-face teaching and learning, which means that the primary exit program, the PEP exam results would have come out some time ago. And just last week, the Caribbean Examination Council, CXC, released the CSEC and CAPE results. We're going to be starting with the PEP results. And according to an article that was published in the Jamaica Gleaner, it said that girls outshine boys in PEP exam. So there were roughly 36,100 students that were registered for the PEP exam this year. 18,495, almost 18,500 of these candidates were boys, and 17,583 were girls, which means that a greater percentage of boys sat the exam compared to girls. And here, the data shows that girls outperform boys. In language arts, 86% of girls received scores in the highly proficient or proficient categories, while boys lagged behind at 68.5%. What are your thoughts on this? What could have contributed to our girls significantly performing above our males? Sandrine, you're the lone rose among the panelists this afternoon. What are your thoughts?
Okay, good afternoon, everyone, and thank you for having me. At this point, I feel like I need to get a job at Monroe because I kind of feel out of place with the rest of the panel. But to answer the question, I think one of the main things that we should look at is the pandemic, first of all. And I don't know of much of the numbers in regards to how many females had devices as against males, but I know that from my own experience in my own community, if I go outside and I see a number of children who are displaced, meaning they had no devices, they had no access, in my own space, I can't speak for anywhere else, but in my own space, I felt like there were more males than females. I felt like there was more organizations, groups, persons, and that's usually the case. It's not just with PEP, but that's usually the case. I felt like there were more persons who would have targeted the females. I felt like the females got more help and a lot of the boys didn't. I remember one young man coming to me and he was in grade 5. I think he was grade 5 or grade 6. He was supposed to be doing the PEP exam, but he said his sisters got assistance and he didn't. So he went to work at the mechanic shop. Now, this is a 10-year-old or 11-year-old boy. No, nothing is wrong if, he's learning a skill at the mechanic shop. But personally, I would have preferred to see a male student at that age being in school and getting education. And so generally in Jamaica, especially during the pandemic, I felt like there was more assistance for the girls. I felt like more persons were reaching out to females, and I felt like the boys were lost in the system, so they didn't get help. So they're coming back to school and they really know nothing. I must congratulate the top student who is actually a male. But then again, it leads me back to the home. He had both parents. I think there were one is a doctor. I don't remember what's his mother's job, but the fact is he had the home support. And I feel like many of our boys don't have that home support. And especially during the pandemic, they don't have any devices. I feel like many of the parents were willing to just send them out and say, well, here, better you go learn a skill, or better you just, I saw boys doing carpentry and being masons, and they're not even in high school. And so I just felt like it started at the home. It started with the organizations and the groups who were willing to reach out to the females, who were willing to give them a tablet, who were willing to call them to school for something, but the boys were left out. They were sent to learn a skill, do something else, or just left to be on their own. And so you had a lot of primary school boys either doing something outside of academics, or you found them doing other undesirable things like smoking and stuff like that. And it was really painful because they're not even teenagers, they're children. But I felt like home and different groups, that's where the problem was for our boys.
All right, thank you very much. So the home plays a very important role in terms of our performance of males. All right, we may come back to that point, but let me go now and let me take Mr. Leng. What are your thoughts on this issue?
Yes, I must agree with Ms. Morris. You can see where the males lag behind by 68.5%, especially in subjects like English language, where in the household, people or parents emphasize that the girl should be well spoken, as opposed to the boy who can just go outside, play marble with his friends. There's more leniency on the boys and there are lower expectations. Such low expectations leads to them being delinquent, and they're just not having that level of appreciation for their schoolwork as opposed to the girls. So I do agree, with what Miss Morris said, and I just believe that that low level of expectation causes boys to be a bit more laid back and less interested in their schoolwork.
Okay, so people expect boys to not to do well. That's what I'm getting from you. All right, Mr. Fair, what are your thoughts? You've been in the system a while now.
Yes, good afternoon, everyone. Personally, I must say that from many different learning theories, we understand that males are what we call late bloomers. So oftentimes, if you have two children, a boy and a girl at home, you realize that the girl always outperformed the boy until probably around age 14, 15, and 16. That is predicated somewhat to their puberty, their level of maturity, and how fast they get on with that. So I think one of the reasons for girls outperforming boys at PEP would is predicated on that reason. If we fast forward, which I suspect you may, to the C-second CAPE results, boys outperformed the females. Another thing with PEP, with the ability tests, the maths test, and the mental ability, is that it's around science, social studies, and language arts. And that is more so, but those subjects are dominant with female overall. But if you look at STEM education, science, technology, mathematics, and engineering, that is where males outperform females. So it can be a matter of, well, it is a matter of the maturity level, the subject areas, and it could also be predicated on what Miss Morris says with the home and parental involvement. That's my 2 cents.
Right. Number of issues being raised here. I will chime in, but let me just take a more card Brown, and then we can take the discussion from there.
All right, thank you so much. I may want to, do a little spin to what was said. I really agree with those points, but I may want to say it is as a result of the absence of planning and policy as it relates to boys' education. We have not been planning for boys, so we have been talking about the issues over and over before the pandemic, and there is nothing as it relates to how do we plan as an education system for boys, and what is it that we have in terms of policies governing how we teach males from females. So I may want to go that way, that the ministry should focus its energy on, planning and policy as it relates to boys' education.
All right. So you are saying that the ministry has a responsibility. Others are saying contributing factors also involve the home preparation and the general expectation of boys. Would you agree, disagree, though, on the principle, the idea that boys are expected to fail? Would you say that is something that our society perpetrates?
I would not agree with that. I would not agree with that. In no sense. What we know is that we have an issue with males, doing well at, the early age, but we're just not doing anything. That is where I'm coming from. So it's not that we expect them to fail. They're not, very fast in their early stage. So that is given, biologically. And we need just to put something in place now to aid, to facilitate them at that stage. Don't allow them to fail out their primary school education. What can be done? There is an issue there. What can be done at that level? So I wouldn't say we expect them to fail. I really don't like how that is phrased, but we have an issue at the level.
I'm the host. I can ask the questions. That's totally fine. Hold on. I was going to come back to you. But why is it then that, based on what Sandrine said earlier, that is it that parents or caregivers, they do not understand the development of males? Why they send the males to go and do this while the girls, I'm just saying what you have said, the girls get more attention in terms of, okay, you should speak standard English, you should read, you should do your homework. Is it that our parents, or parents in general, caregivers, do not understand this aspect of male development why they are not given enough attention?
If I may, I think that's the case. Firstly, I think a lot of Jamaican parents are still stuck in tradition. And I'm not saying anything against tradition. I'm just saying we're in a different era. We are in a different time where we need to shift our focus. So yes, you grew up in a time, or your parents raised you to know that, or to believe that, okay, boys should be outside doing, sawing something, cutting something, building something, while females should be inside cleaning and studying. That is their era. I really not, I'm not going to say much about it, but I want parents to understand that we are now in a different time where it doesn't matter what you're doing, or even if you have a skill, it's good to have your academics to back it up. And I think a lot of parents are not understanding that, and a lot of them are still stuck in those specific gender roles. And that's one of the major problems we face. So which is why they will always be there telling the girl, oh, you don't need to go to any friend, go inside and take up your book. But yet they said the boy can go outside, as Mr. Fair said, and play, or go outside and learn to do something with your father or your uncles or something of the sort.
Right, thank you, Ms. Flores. Yes, Audley, you are going to come back.
Yes, I read an article this morning in regards to the challenges that Jamaican males face. And one of them is tightly associated with what Ms. Morris said a while ago, is that Jamaican males are expected to move from schoolers to providers in a very, very short time. And it can be debated, these are gender roles, but as it is now, we can see that males who excel academically in terms of language, the arts, and so on, they are not paid as well as those who have a skill. And I think there's a thrust now where males want to start working, want to start earning from an earlier age. And as of such, they will find themselves doing what they think they can do to start earning now, so that they can transition as soon as possible from schoolers to providers. And I think that's a psychological thing that really impact our males.
Right? Myriad of issues being raised. The home definitely plays a role. And I also want to agree that the education system plays a role as well. Now, I'm going to ask my teachers who are here, my colleagues on this very matter. One of you went to one of our sister colleges, Bethlehem Moravian. I'm not sure where the other study, but regardless, I wrote a column some time ago on the pedagogy, talking about boy pedagogy. Is our pedagogy reaching our boys? Because we can talk about the home and all these things, but as educators, is the education system reaching our boys in how we are teaching?
All right. I'll answer in this way. When we mention education system, we're talking as a whole. But when we talk about pedagogy in specific, there are two main tenets. So you have student-centeredness and you have teacher-centered learning. I think we are reaching our boys more using the student-centered approaches rather than what we were using before. So of course, now you'd realize that boys are more literate in language arts, in mathematics, and in IT. So with the thrust to student-centeredness now, we are reaching them more. There's still much more that has to be done. And it goes back to what Mr. Brown stated about policy and policy implementation into the curriculum. It's important to underscore that based on the curriculum and what the objectives are, the content to be taught and to be learned, it does not lend itself to a lot of STEM activities. And that is part and parcel the reason why many of our males are disinterested until they reach about fourth, fifth form where they can choose STEM subjects.
So why you highlight STEM subjects?
Because males do better in the STEM subjects: science, technology, mathematics, engineering. So the literature is overwhelming there. You have few males who do very well at academics, English, principles of business, and programming, and so on, like myself and like Mr. Brown. But most males tend to go towards the arts and towards STEM subjects. And we can see this now also, and I think the ministry is doing a good job going that route into STEM subjects, because there is a need for highly skilled laborers. Just the other day, the ministry, I can't remember the exact minister, but the prime minister also mentioned that we need more construction workers, people who are actually qualified up to a certain degree. So, of course, the STEM subjects, to get males into what they're actually interested in, is a major part of males achieving what they can achieve.
I'm going to come to the others, but I'm not being provocative, but I am heavily based in the humanities.
Yes.
But don't you feel also, and this is how sometimes we feel as males in the humanities, that because there is a stereotype that goes with the humanities, sometimes males may feel like they need to go to the STEM areas to prove manliness, to prove masculinity, when they can equally achieve in the humanities.
I think you're opening up a can of worms here. Yes, as a student of humanities myself, I do know that male students can achieve a lot there. But the truth is, the literature is overwhelming. Boys perform better. Facts don't care about your feelings, It's what the facts and what the literature suggests, that boys perform better and they're more interested in things. So we can even draw up a study from the Scandinavian countries, where if you still allow boys to choose what they want and females to choose what they want, the boys will still choose the STEM subjects. That does not negate from the fact that boys do well in humanities, but it also hinges on the fact that boys are late bloomers, and that's the point. That's just a fact. The literature is there.
All right, Mr. Fair. Mr. Brown, can we hear your thoughts?
I may want to say that we're not doing well as it relates to pedagogy for boys in Jamaica, not at all. I think that especially for the languages and for the humanities subjects, they are not packaged in such a way that is appealing to males. And I heard Mr. Fear spoke about STEM, but you can STEM all subjects. You can intertwine STEM into any subject to kind of package it in a way that it is attractive to males. But you don't see that type of emphasis coming from the ministry to say to teachers, to say to teacher training institution, this is the new move in terms of how we go about teaching boys. We don't see that. It's just one big pot that we cook and we share it and give everybody out of it within the classroom space. So we have to be very deliberate in how we package our content, how we tailor our lessons to suit our meals and to really reach them.
All right. Before I take a break from here, I'm going to go to the chat, but both of you are teachers in the system. Are you deliberate in your pedagogy towards the students that you teach? Well, you teach at Monroe, but it's kind of hard to compare, but are you deliberate in terms of your pedagogy?
Certainly. I try to do a lot of practical activities. Those that also will take in presentations, to have them, lead. Males like to lead. So you give them leadership roles, hands-on activity projects, and so forth. So I'm very deliberate. I try to figure out what they like, what really excites them. and try to see how best I can incorporate it in my class. So yes.
Okay. And you?
Yes, as you said, we teach at Monroe College, so we have to be deliberate. And one thing to understand is that males love to compete. So my predominant subjects are entrepreneurship, principles of business, and principles of accounts. And in the theory-based entrep and principles of business, we have to be we are heavy on debating and getting them to express their points and debate each other, because males love the competition, and that has worked. For accounts, you will imagine they will do well because it's a practical subject, but naturally they do well at accounts. So yes, we are very deliberate, probably more so because we teach at Monroe than if I was teaching at an all-girls school or at a co-ed school.
Okay, thank you very much. Let's go to the chat, see what is being said there. Sabrina says our system is not specific, it's generic. Renard says, if we understand the foundation of education, both sexes were never given the equal opportunity. In fact, girls were usually the ones to learn the soft skills, while the boys do the opposite. Truth be told, we may never see equity as it relates to both sexes given the same opportunity academically, and both sexes don't have the same ability and interest. Sabrina says males do well in languages as well. There are a couple of them on. Big up to my colleagues and friends in the language domain. Where am I now? Adika is asking, is the system designed for the success of girls though, as opposed to boys? And I think a lot of times in my conversations with males too, I get this impression that the system is designed for girls to succeed, to achieve more compared to boys. And that's one of the things that prompted my column on the whole pedagogy. Is it that our approach to teaching and learning, more centered on girls? Is it that the curriculum, the education system itself is focused in that regard? Why our males do significantly less in terms of academic performance? Because if we go to the secondary level, we still have the issue that more girls outperform males at the CSEC exams. And earlier I was on a forum talking about our system being so focused on cognitive development as opposed to being a more holistic system. We have more boys dropping out of schools compared to females. When we go to the tertiary level, the ratio is very, the ratio is wide. The gap is wide between the number of males versus females that's enrolled in our system. So is the system doing a disservice to our males? Is it designed for males to fail? Javon, let me hear your thoughts.
Honestly, my thought on this, I attended Monroe College, so it's not a co-ed school, single sex. And when I look at schools in Trinidad, they outperformed a lot of schools here in Jamaica. And Trinidad, majority of the schools there, they're single sex schools. So I believe that how you cater to the male as opposed to how you cater to the woman, it's different. And schools don't have the time to be imparting education and to applying those soft skills, how you deal with a woman as opposed to how you deal with a man. And I just think we don't have enough time how our education system is set up in Jamaica to facilitate, educating both the male and the female in a different way, because I believe that we do learn by different means as opposed to boys and female. When you also look at the subjects such as mathematics, a math teacher will bring, let's say, a bead into a class to say, that's how you count, 1B, 2B, different colors B. And that's where you see pedagogy coming into play. While you go to an English class, you're seeing, you get a book to read an extract. That's boring. No boy is going to want to sit down and actually, well, you have the exceptions. But majority of us as male don't want to sit down and read a book that's boring. We drop asleep by the time we skip 2 pages. And that's what we have to understand, that we learn differently. A girl might be excited by a book while a boy isn't excited. So as Mr. Brown rightfully said, we have to come up with ways in which we can make certain subjects, such as the humanities, more interactive to males, but at the same time, that can be time-consuming how our education system is set up, because there's limited time, and to cater to the different needs of boys and girls is really hard in how Jamaica's system is. And that's my view.
We thank you for sharing your view, Jafon. I'm seeing my learned colleague and friend in the chat. We were discussing something similar earlier. And Karif, I really want to hear your thoughts verbalized. So he's saying a critical element has to be evaluated. A critical element that has to be evaluated and perhaps reoriented is how assessment is done, or to evaluate the notion of success. Would you like to elaborate on that, Karif? We'll speak shortly. All right. Yes, Miss Morris, let's come back to you. But you went to all girls schools too, so nobody, none of the panel, none of you came from a co-ed school where, you know, we could probably make some sort of comparison. But
Yeah,
you're at the university level.
Well, someone went to Manning's, I think.
I went to Manning's.
Oh, you went to Manning's, yes. But we'll come back to you. But yeah, the university level is a bit different because we're dealing with adult learners. So, you know, even though we're supposed to be diverse in our pedagogy, but adults learn differently. But based on your observation at UE, do you find that your lecturers try to cater to the different, you know, learning needs of all male, female learn?
Well, if I should comment on what was said in the chat, I think that is the same problem that we have at the university level, and it is a problem that we always bring up, that the mode of assessment is it's not wide enough. So you come, they give you the information, and you're supposed to just remember that, study that, and practice that for an exam or 100% exam that is at the end of the semester. Some faculties try to work in a different way. So they try to give mid semesters and they try to give projects. And I realize where that works, because those faculties, you will see students coming out with A's, a lot of A's. And then you have my faculty where it's just a lot of 100% exams. And we find that more students struggle to do that. But if the mode of assessment was different, where students don't have to remember everything that they studied for 4 months or for a year, then I believe that the results would have been different, because they would have gotten 20% from something here, 20% from something here, and then they would finish the exams. But the 100% exam is really difficult. And I don't think it's just for males, I think it's right across the board. Another thing that I noticed at the high school level, however, is that males have different interests, and not a lot of schools facilitate that. And the ministry haven't like made it mandatory or anything. So for example, well, Cornell College is right across from Mount Alvernia. The Cornell College boys had a lot of boys coming to Mount Alvernia to do food and nutrition, and they all did well. And a lot of people were surprised because they're like, boys, and I'm like, yes, boys, because they want to become a chef, or they want to open their own business, their own restaurants, and they wanted food and nutrition, or they wanted clothing and textiles. And so because the school extended that olive branch to say, okay, we're going to partner with the all-girls school and allow you to do it, we find that the boys were getting a lot of 1 straight A's. And today, some of them have walked into their professions, while some of them are at UTech majoring in food and nutrition. And I find that a lot of schools don't do that, because the gender roles, again, they still don't believe that a boy should be majoring in food and nutrition, just like some all-girls schools don't believe that girls should be doing technical drawing. But boys have different interests. Not all boys want to become an engineer. Not all boys want to become a physician. Some boys want to do something else. But because the education system don't facilitate it, because we still have those gender barriers, then we find that or students fail because one thing I've learned is that if you don't have a passion for something, you just do it because that's what is available. You might pass just because you study to pass, but you don't remember it, or you might not pass with the highest grades as if you were doing something that you wanted to do. So, first thing I would say, I believe the education system, especially at the tertiary level, should try to find other ways of assessment. And secondly, I believe at the secondary level, we should introduce all subjects across the board in all schools so that students can do what they want to do, something that will facilitate the future that they want for themselves.
Thank you very much. And I'm going to go to my Monroe colleague. And before you share your experience at the Manning School, is there a reason why food and nutrition is not offered at Monroe?
I think it's
yes,
based
it
on
was. No, it was here, actually,
yes.
but for some reason they removed it. I guess
It's not demanded as how we probably would want by the students.
Okay. So the few who want to do it, they go to their neighbors to do it. Okay. All right, but yeah, back to your Manning's experience now. What was the pedagogy like, the approach from your teachers like regarding both genders?
I am not very old. I'm not very young. So I would have been in the era when there was quite a bit of teacher-centeredness. That is where there a lot of dictation and chalk and talk. So I was in that era. I did get some amount of student-centeredness, but at Manning's, I can recall quite vividly in third form, just like most schools at third form, I was exposed to all the subjects, including food and nutrition, including clothes and textiles. So I can recall having those subjects being done at the third form level.
Okay, fair enough. Karif, are you ready now? Probably not. All right, so you can keep your comments coming if you are not a part of the panel and you want to add something, you can indicate by raising your hand or by leaving a comment in the chat. All right, so we're still talking about males and education, and we want to talk also about the presence of males in the education system. Does the presence of a male teacher in the education system, in the classroom, have any effect on male students?
I think Javon would be very good to answer that question.
I was going to start with him. Yes, Javon.
Well, to some extent, there are pros and there are cons. As opposed to, let's say, I'm hearing the lesson from, a lady. I would more likely retain such information because of, the tone of voice and everything. But I'm seeing a gentleman in the classroom. There's that level of respect, Oftentimes we say share both respect to women and men, but a boy looking up on a teacher, there's that level of he's like a father figure. And so I would say that's important to have in the classroom. For subjects like math, the hardcore subjects, you find that that's normally where the male teachers are again, and that's where the boys pull to. That's also another thing we can look at. I wouldn't say there is much of a difference as opposed to a woman teaching me versus a man, but there are students in which I've spoken to and they would prefer male teachers because there is that sense of commonality among these them.
Okay.
I think it depends on the student, to be very honest, but I wouldn't say there is.
So you will learn a subject because you have a soothing voice listening to.
Honestly, whether you believe it or not, a lot of students do make that decision on that premise.
But I want to understand something, and I'm not trying to be provocative. You said you spoke of a woman and her female colleague teacher and her voice, but then when you spoke about your male teachers, they used the word respect.
Right.
So are we to understand that there is greater respect for the male gender from a man, and just based our learning, our decision to learn too, based on the type of female teacher that is in front?
I would say it depends on the student. This is all circumstantial because you'll have a student that just believes that some students are coming from misogynistic households where they believe that, hey, a lady should not be in front of me. And that's another issue we should look at. While some students don't really have a preference. So some students are there that they need a firm instructor. They need a man to actually say, this is what you need to do to be done. And honestly, they'll sit there. I know a lot of friends that before they had, let's say, a strict teacher. I wouldn't say Mr. Brown was a strict teacher, but unless they had somebody say, if you don't complete this assignment by XYD, this is going to happen. And you find where men are less lenient in that sense as opposed to women. So that could be a cause why students or boys perform better in classes led by men.
So are you saying therefore that, I mean, the ratio of male to female teachers is not, we don't have a significant number of male teachers in the education system. So am I to understand, are we to understand that if we had more male teachers, more male presence in the education system, our boys would do better?
Yes, I would definitely agree with that. Same as if we had more father figures in society, males would perform better. So I think it's stemming from a bigger issue going straight down into the classroom.
All right. Let me hear what Audley has to say.
Personally, I can remember in high school, I wasn't the student who gave enough trouble to get in trouble, but I can also remember that male students, if in my time and at my Monroe College, they will give the female teacher more trouble than the male teacher. Why is that? I think it's because males love with what we call tough love, and we make females with more of a softer love. So females will give more chances, the male teachers won't. And there is some, I think probably the word that Ling was looking for was actually there's a fear factor in terms of when a man is teaching you as a male than when there's a female. You still respect the female, but you will try to get away with some infractions than if it were a male teacher. From my personal experience as a student and as a teacher.
Okay, but I'm going to answer the same question. You think if we had more male teachers, our boys would perform better?
To be honest, I am not sure. I think because while we were discussing along the line, I realized what came out in terms of how males are taught. So I think, as I said before, if we incorporate STEM into our pedagogical structure more, both male teachers and female teachers, more STEM incorporated into our lessons, then I think we would reach the males more, whether it's a male teacher or a female teacher. And that was my point I was trying to get over.
All right, so you are an advocate for STEM. All right, Mr. Brown.
I got into trouble, I think 2 years ago on this very same topic, because I believe at the secondary level, we should have less female teachers. I don't think they do a very good job with males. One, they tend to find all the explanation. Why is it that this young man is not doing his work? They're so soft to them. So personally, I don't think that female teachers, and I'm up for the debate. I'm up, to be bashed with this statement.
Is that a
But
sexist comment?
yes, but it is all because of what I would have observed, in my setting, that I don't think they manage boys well, especially when you have males coming from, maternal single parent household, where probably there's some relationship issues and they have very little respect for females. So they tend not to be serious with the female teachers. They tend to be rude. They say anything to them, walk out, while the fear factor that Ling failed to speak to. It's not, I don't think it's respect. They won't say certain things or do certain things in a male teacher's class. They will get the work done. The female, all sort of issues. But if I had the authority, I would run the experiment to have probably 90 or 80% of male teachers at the secondary level. At the primary level, it's okay, but at the secondary level, I think if we should up the male teacher ratio, we'd see improved results for males.
All right. With such a bold statement, Mr. Brown, it would be helpful to see your face.
I'm cutting out shortly, so I'll do that. I have to move to another.
Okay. Right. So there he is, if we want to attack him, all right? Sandrine, what are your thoughts?
All right, so I won't dispute, or I won't argue the fact that having males in the class is really a good thing. Male teachers in the class is really a good thing for our boys, because naturally we know that a huge percentage of our male students don't have fathers. And so when they come to school, a lot of them look to their male teachers as their father figure, as one of the only males in their life that's pushing them to actually be something good. I think a lot of our male teachers understand that fact and have gone through it themselves, and so they try to put in the effort for the boys. Maybe they're not as lenient and maybe they're not as soft, but they're there for them and they're supporting them, and some of them even share their own story, because I've seen it here at the university where the male teachers have got down and say to the boys that, I was in your shoes or something, especially if the male teacher is an old boy. So for example, a Monroe teacher speaking to someone who said he came from Monroe. So they get down to the level of being a father for the boys. And sometimes you hear how they talk to them, yo, big man and all of that, boss, how you doing and whatever, where's the assignment and everything. And so they speak to them how they would want their father to speak to them, and that helps. I cannot say that if we had more male teachers, we would have had more boys passing. Maybe that's true, but at the end of the day, there's still a lot of boys who are in male classes with male teachers that still don't do well, because I believe that doing well it's more than just having a male teacher there. I think one, you have to want to do well, and two, it's how we teach the subjects. So I cannot say having them there would definitely allow the boys, but I think it would help to some extent. And about the leniency thing, that is true, because females are a lot more lenient, and that's not just school, that's just general. I've seen even security, when they see the boys come, they're so lenient to the boys, but with the girls, they're like, you should know this or whatever. So I think generally in society, females are more lenient, and so having more male figures will help. But I cannot say definitely, we would start seeing 100% pass in all subjects. So I can't say that part.
Taken. Thank you. I think we have Karif now, so we're going to take his points. Karif?
Hi, everyone. Loving the discussion that's going on so far. Just a second, let me enable this. Yes, so I'm saying loving the discussion that's going on so far from your panelists, and I really want to say that the points raised are some critical issues. And one of the things that I'd like to add, though, as it relates to the conversation, is that I know that the organization is focusing on males, but perhaps what we need to do is to evaluate what we consider learning to be and success, and not necessarily focus on gender success, but an individual success, not necessarily making a comparison between a girl and a boy or the performance of male and female, but what growth or progress has the individual student made for him or her to now function in the world, and within a context where he or she has to interact with other individuals. As it relates to the issue of gender and teaching, and respecting one sex over the other or one gender over the other, that I think is a tricky one, because the school itself is a place of resocialization. And so the same way how we treat, for example, individuals in society, that is the same way how we typically treat individuals within the school. So if we lack that sort of respect for females, that is exactly what we will see in the school. As is often said, the school is a microcosm of society. In some schools, for example, at Jonathan Grant High, there's a female teacher who teaches mechanics, and she's well respected by her male students. So they do not see her as a female invading a male space, but they see her as an individual who is competent in the area to teach the subject area and to impart values and knowledge and skills to them. So if we move away from this construct of and the stereotypes of what males should be doing and what females should be doing, and the measurement of success, then perhaps we may change the narrative and what people are able to do.
Kareem, very valid point that you raised right there. And which is why I tend to poke oddly to find out why you keep referring STEM, because is it, I know you speak to the data and stuff, but I think sometimes because we have been cultured a particular way, then we keep repeating that cycle and it trickles down, maybe because of personal bias as well. And you go to a boys' school, and then we give off this notion, or you teach at a boys' school, we give off this notion that, okay, males are the ones who should be teaching the STEM subjects. And sometimes I feel like, no, I'm just saying, sometimes it happens. Sometimes it happens. And maybe sometimes we go to the classrooms, and because we were socialized in such a manner, some boys may feel like a female can never teach them, because they were cultured to say males dominate in this subject area, and vice versa. Seeing a female teaching a technical drawing or mechanical engineering and stuff like that, they may, don't play it. And so I think we should see the value that each person brings to the table, because some of our female colleagues could rightly outperform male colleagues in some of the male dominated areas, and vice versa. So it's a matter of, let us appreciate people for the skills that they bring to the table and try to reshape the mentality. That's our motto here at uMbre, reshaping the mentality and helping our boys and our males generally to see things from a different perspective. Barry, you want to come in?
Okay, I try, I'm a debater. I try to be as objective as possible rather than being subjective. And that's, I do agree with Miss Morris, as she said what I said, is that I don't think if we have more male teachers, it will be better. It all comes down to the pedagogical approach in teaching males. Now, we are all individuals, and however we look at it, we have females and we have males. We'll always have that comparison no matter what we do. And of course, we can measure success. We can get back to the assessment afterwards. But the data is there, and I'm a person who is big on data. And as I said before, in the Scandinavian countries, they cultured all the students to choose what you want. And the biggest difference between males and females, because males and females are almost the same thing, in terms of psychology. Same. The biggest difference is that males are more interested in things and females are more interested in people. That's the biggest psychological difference with males and females. It's the data, not my belief, it's the data. In the Scandinavian countries, when they allow them to choose what they want, there was a bigger gap in terms of what they chose. And males went to the practical areas, females to more theoretical areas. As Leng stated, experience, male students, majority do not like books, to sit and read books. And that is just the facts. There are some exceptions like myself who will read off 2 books in a week. So while there are exceptions, I think majority is what the data shows, that once you incorporate STEM into teaching males, they will do good at every other subject. And that is my point. So we have to go back to the pedagogical approach, because you cannot just have males and females in a class and use one teaching strategy or just student-centered or teacher-centered without thinking about the psychological difference in how males and females learn. You can't just say individuals. We have to use different methods that will reach male students and female students.
So you're saying, and you're siding with the data that you've read.
I can't start with that is the data.
No. I mean, these are notions that we can agree or disagree on. So are you siding with the data to say that inherently men are more males are STEM oriented?
Majority, yes. And I use the example. If you're going to teach a student literature, let me go to my subject, principles of business. And it's a very theoretical subject. And all you do is just discuss what is barter system, what is money, difference between private and public sector. They will get bored. You have to infuse some technology in the classroom. You have to have robust debates, project-based assessment. You have to incorporate some mathematics in terms of, let's look at the statistics in terms of how people are paid in private sector versus public sector, mathematics there. So you have to infuse that to get them interested, because they're different learned intelligences, and males predominantly with STEM in terms of getting hands-on, that's how majority of males learn.
So your call therefore is for an integrated approach to be incorporated in teaching and learning.
Precisely.
All right, thank you very much. We're going to move on. A very interesting conversation that we're having on males and the education system. And we have been looking at performance and pedagogy with regard to our males. Now we want to move on to grooming. We've seen school has reopened, and already we have issues of grooming, inappropriate attire for school. And of course, our males again are called into question for grooming. Yes, and this is a very touchy one, but I want to bring in, is Brown still with us? No, let's see. All right, so Leng, let me start with you. Do you think the grooming, I don't even want to say the policy, but the grooming practice in schools, do you think it is too strict and needs to be relaxed?
Yes, I definitely think it's too strict, and it's not from a point where I'm a breaker. I always prefer the traditional way of wearing here, but we also have to understand that as we grow old, as we develop as a nation, there are certain things that we need to move from. For example, the whole queen system. So we must develop as a nation. We must have an appreciation for our heritage. And there's a saying that until America, when America sneezes, Jamaica catch a flu. And we can see where icons such as Bob Marley, Jamaica didn't respect those icons until America had a greater appreciation for them. So why can't we take initiative as a nation to say, hey, this traditional way of doing it, this British way of doing it comes to an end. Let's have a more diverse and way in which we represent our people. Because we're not coming from, our hair quality isn't that of the British man. Brushing it, sometimes it rolls up. And there are ways in which we can properly attire ourselves, but it's just not a low cut here. And I think we should give some rooms to the whole what we accept in society as a business or school haircut.
All right, so you steer the discussion into the hairstyle. You mentioned a point about being Americanized, American, British, European influence. But the truth is, I've spent 6-7 years in France, and I would have visited a number of European countries where it's neither here nor there to them. So why is it that in our system, if they have moved away from, if they are liberal in terms of their grooming policy in this context, why is it that here in Jamaica, we still hold on to these practices?
That's a very good question. Jamaica, personally, for me, I just think we stick to one thing. There's slow progress in our economy, forgive me, government, slow progress in everything. So it takes a while for us to catch on. And I just think that we as young people, we as the future leaders of Jamaica and as nation builders, that we should help to steer it in the right way. So if you don't have people pushing for it, if we didn't have slavery where people actually fought for our emancipation, Jamaica always requires a push from history. And that's what we're trying to do right now, create that push. I don't know why we haven't moved. I really can't find an answer to that question. But I guess that slavery mentality we see today, Marcus Garvey said, emancipate yourself from mental slavery. So I'm guessing it is a form of mental slavery where we were so conditioned, well conditioned, even when the slave masters moved on, we can't move.
All right, thank you. Sandrine, let's bring you in at this point. Your take on the grooming policy in schools or practice. Sandrine?
Okay, sorry, I think I was having some connection issues. Let me turn on my camera. All right, so in my view, I think it's a two-part thing. I think, well, firstly, we need to change our employment system if we're going to change our school system on grooming. Because one of the reasons why most schools will say they're so strong on grooming is because they're teaching them how to be professionals, because they know that when they get into the professional world, if they go to an interview looking a certain type of way, they will not get the job. So therefore, if we change the school system, but at the end of the day, they still won't get a job because they look a certain way, then we'll still have a problem. So the first thing is that we have to change the professional world before we can change the school system, because the school system is working in alignment to prepare them for that world. Speaking from experience, I go to the university, I can count on my hands how many boys in my class have their hair low cuts and wear big pants, because they really don't. 90% of them, their hair is very long, longer than mine, my natural hair. So really, and I don't think it changed anything. Those boys are still getting their A's, they're still top in the class, they're still on D's on a roll. So I really don't find a problem with that. So I don't think that's the problem. I think the real problem is the grooming policies are in accordance with the working world. And so we need to change that first. So I remember having this conversation because, of course, I'm a law student and law is a black and white profession. Therefore, even though they allow them with the hair, a lot of teachers find a problem with it because they believe that when they get to the black and white part of the profession, there may be a problem with the grooming policy. And so schools are real. I can't blame the schools because yes, I don't agree with the grooming policies, but I can't blame them because generally they're just preparing the boys for what is to come. So if we're really going to change, we have to change everything about Jamaica and not just in the education system. We have to change the professional world or the business world as well. I personally don't think your hair and your pants have anything to do with it, but I know why schools do it.
Right. So it's in preparation for this whole concept of what we call professionalism. And I remember writing and I suggested that, we need to expand our vision of what this notion of professionalism actually entails. All right, I'm coming to your point, Karif. Mr. Fair, let me take your thoughts. You interact with boys every day. Do you have issues with, or let me not ask if you have issues, but do they conform to the grooming policy of Monroe?
I think Ms. Morris correctly answered the rationale why schools would have this policy. And equally so, I can understand that most male students have an issue. If I was their age, I would have an issue as well. So yes, we understand it does not affect them, their proclivity to learn. But there are two curriculums that are taught at school. One is the actual curriculum, the subject, and the other is a hidden curriculum in terms of we teach students to conform so that when they get into the working world and society at large, the truth is you are judged. No matter how we try to pretty it up and say we should not judge people, you are judged based on your appearance by everyone. And even the people who say we don't judge, we do judge based on how a person looks. So I think Ms. Morris handled that very well, and I agree with her. And yes, most male students I've met across the education system, not just at Monroe, have a problem with that rule.
So, do you feel like if we relaxed the grooming policy, it would be easy going, or would we have issues to deal with in terms of being extravagant? Because I kind of feel like one of the concerns is that students may be elaborate if we relax these grooming policies.
Yes, that's one of the major concern by most teachers, principals, school boards, that if we do relax the grooming policy, then there will be an influx of much undesirable dressing. Pants may be too tight, skirts may be too short, too many colors may be in the hair, and we may get to a point where we would not want to get by relaxing. The truth is, I don't think we believe that we have a society that respect rules enough. And because rules are not respected enough, there is that want not to relax the few rules that we have control of, because we are afraid that we might end up in what we can describe as an anarchy.
Interesting point. And I see, Carrie, we ought not to make decisions based on fear. So let's just go and relax it. Earlier you said what it comes to what is to come is also a pluralistic world that already exists on a global context, which is right. Yes, Audley.
What is the question? I didn't hear that. My net sipped out.
No, he said that we're not supposed to make decisions out of fear, based on fear of anarchy, based on fear that students may come with elaborate haircuts or excessively tight pants.
I'm not sure if I understand what that means, because part of the reason why rules are there is to basically circumvent certain behaviors from happening. So the reason there is a sign that you don't drive more than 80 kilometers per hour, you don't want everybody to be driving 150. So part and parcel why there are rules is to stop certain behavior, because we do the fear of what can happen to the person breaking the rules and to other persons who have not broken the rules. So I'm not sure I understand exactly what that means.
All right, and see Edward saying, aren't these rules just vestige of colonialism?
Some are, because you will see a student who is more African, if they grow their hair high, probably like yours, then we see where teachers may tell him to go home or get his hair trimmed. But if you see a student who has more Caucasian and the hair is at the same level, then there's some lenience. That I don't agree with, and that I think is appalling. There should be one rule. So if the African students can't wear their hair to this length, then the Caucasian students should not be. So I believe that there should be the one rule for everybody.
Right. I think we're touching a couple of things. I don't want to raise the religious aspect to it, because we also have that side that contributes to how we attire ourselves as well. There was a period in history, even up to now in some denominations, some religions, where it is blasphemous. That's a very strong word, but that's the case, for a man to grow his hair beyond certain length. And I think it's not just in the school system, but probably as Edward is suggesting in his question, maybe these are just coming from the colonial past that we have. Yes, Kerry.
Thank you, O'Neill. I think your first speaker on the topic, or for this section, Leng, has set a very good foundation for the conversation. And as we're seeing, Edward is contributing to the discussion as it relates to those colonial remnants that still remain with us and some archaic rules. Don't get me wrong, I do believe in rules because they help us to function in society. However, when we continue to embrace rules that oppress individuals, that is where I do not necessarily agree with these things. And one of the things that I dare to say is that oftentimes we have rules, or we enforce rules in schools, and we do not necessarily understand the rationale for the rule. You have touched on an aspect of religion where we have glorified a white Jesus with long flowing hair, when our male students of African descent do not have that ability to grow their hair and to come to school. And we cast them aside, thinking that they're not good enough to be in society. Again, we also live in a pluralistic world where not everybody will conform to a straight jacket and tie or profession. We have individuals who will become entertainers. We have individuals who will become social media influencers. And these individuals, the schools ought to be that place where they are taught about the realities of the world, not conforming to the colonial ideologies of what the world is, because really and truly, the world is very diverse out there.
Thank you, Kerry.
So I have a question. What exactly do we mean by oppressing? Because it's a very strong word. What do we mean by oppressing students with grooming of their hair and in their decorum overall? Because if I could argue as a debater that the amount of work that is done in school is oppressive. I could argue that for a student, very, very successful. But the thing we have to look at is we have a social contract, and human beings have to live in society, and more so in Jamaica. The parents, because I think parents are major stakeholders of the education system. And if the parent says that my child should not dress like, and I think that's the reason why we won't have it change so fast, because the parents still see the value of students up to secondary school still conforming to their dress code. So it's not a matter of everything a child say he or she wants to do, you allow them to do. When they become of age, you allow them to, and that's fine, because there's a social contract, and the parents are responsible to steer their children where they think it's fit. So there's a social contract. Until the parents in the society believe that this should change, which clearly they don't think it should change, it's their children, I think we ought to respect that. That does not mean we should not discuss it, but to call it oppressive, I think is a very wrong word to use.
But Mr. Fair, isn't that the
May I comment on
recycling? And I'm your man, I'm coming to you, Sanjay. Isn't that just recycling the behaviors, how we were socialized onto the generations behind us? Isn't that what we're doing? Because I I mean, even though I spent a couple of years in France, I was really drawn aback when I went to the French Caribbean just last month. I went to St. Martin, Martinique, and Guadeloupe. And like probably a majority of the men there, you know, like what we call sister lock here, a lot of them they're here. I was really drawn about students are allowed to wear their hair to school, both there in France and so. And life goes on. Life goes on. Even in churches in the French Caribbean, males keep their hair, and you're like, so we were oppressed by the same set of people. So why is it that we see it as bad here or it's unprofessional when in other Black societies it works? So I probably can appreciate what Karif said. You know, we live in a pluralistic society and we should not be fearful of implementing change, because obviously it has worked in other system and it doesn't take away from them being a man or being a professional. Yes,
Right.
Sandrine. Hold on, we come back
Okay.
to
So
you.
to comment on what Mr. Fair said about the parents, I think that's very relative, because I think more parents now are catching on to the idea that I would rather my child go to school as is, because a lot of problems are happening in the system. Firstly, the whole thing that he actually said about what a child of African descent faces versus another child, because I remember one parent came out in social media last year, I think, about last school year actually, about her child, where I'm going to just say it was an assumption that the teacher actually said that for real, and the child had recorded it, where the teacher was saying that, if she's going to do her hair a certain way like them other kids, or like, a person from a certain background. And so a lot of parents now are catching on to the idea that I would rather my child be allowed to go to school with their hair how they want to. And so we find that a lot of fights and arguments are happening in schools across the island as we speak. For the last week, that school has been going on because of the whole grooming policy, where parents, one of the things that parents don't like is not that the school is saying, oh, the child cannot wear the pants or their hair how they want, but the fact that they see their child coming home and missing an entire day of class because of his hair or pants, or because of her hair has a certain style that the school don't like, because it doesn't match the school's mandate, or it doesn't look professional enough. So I don't think a lot of parents want to keep the grooming policy as is. I think a lot of parents are logging onto the idea that this grooming policy needs to be done and away with, to be honest, in my view.
All right, thank you. Coming to you, let me just see what's going on in the chat here. Dante earlier was agreeing with you, Audley. Lesson is saying maybe we need an adjustment to these rules. They have been around for years and things are only getting worse. I don't see how it has been effective. Times are changing, and maybe it is time to adjust those rules as well. And Edward contributed. Most developed countries don't care about these things, especially the Scandinavian countries, of which you hardly spoke earlier. Dante came back to say I also believe that the education system is operating under a double standard when it with regards to grooming of our hair. Kelly, who is from St. Martin, says St. Martin has a few cases with problems with persons, and they're here, and it's dumb, honestly. So, Kerry concludes here, we have to critically assess our colonial ideologies. Sometimes I feel like what we consider discipline or principle is not necessarily based on us wanting good for our children, but it's because it's linked to some colonial cultivation, socialization that we have garnered growing up. And so we just come to accept that, hey, a guy should have his hair low cut, but what's the rationale? You can't give an explanation, or you can't give a justified explanation. You know, it's just like, oh, you're not supposed to go to school looking like that. It's unprofessional. But is it really unprofessional? When, I mean, as a columnist, when I look at the debates going on matters of grooming, I learned that in the 70s, in the 80s, Afro style was very common. So why is it that today our males are not allowed to have their hair at a certain height? It's kind of puzzling when it's the same Jamaica. Oddly, yes, take you before I come to Kerry.
Okay, right. So I agree with Sandrine in that more parents are catching on to the idea that probably we should move from these rules. That is true. More parents are catching on. But I've worked with the PTA, and I think the PTA would have echoed what parents have said in my district association. And I think there's still an overwhelming majority. I mean, we can't just use what we see people writing on social media under our Facebook posts, what they happen. The parents predominantly most still believe that. Think probably we could say there's an African student with their hair high versus a Caucasian, that would be a double standard that we should not accept any at all. But I think the rationale, if the professional or the workspace does not change, then the school will still teach. Give an example. When I just started growing beard, I was doing the JAMVAT program and the NYS program. And I was placed at a hotel, and they want me to wear it. And I moved. So I left the job. So what I was saying is this. As Sandrine did say, the school is teaching students to conform to rules, not because we believe that your hair affects your academic performance, not at all. But we're looking at how employable this until society changes, that social contract changes, then the schools, I believe, will start adapt. I think it's a conversation worth having. I am a very young teacher. I do not believe it affects your learning, but we are teaching the hidden curriculum. And that's the point that's the only point I agree with it on, which is a very strong point.
Thank you, Audley. Kirk, I'm coming to you, but I want to hear from Leng if he observes now where the workplace is more acceptant of this kind of, liberation. Is it something that is still we have a lot of work to do, or are workplaces becoming more open to fitted pants, to people growing their hair?
Yes, I do think we have a lot of work to do. I agree with what Ms. Morris said. we're moving from, I think first we need to reform, the workplace before we can actually look at the school. But we need to put some pace on this project. The workplace they're gradually becoming more acceptable of people because a lot like my classes here at university, there are a lot of students who, as boys, they're here very, very, very long. And you see where they are still attaining their degree, they're still being educated people of society. It doesn't define their character, while there is still a stigma against against how you look. You see where it slowly, define that notion, and it's becoming more and more acceptable. There is definitely a lot more to do in terms of it being normalized, but we see where there's progress, slow progress, but we see progress. Where the private sector actually become, yes, as Dante is saying, where the private sector actually become more acceptable. It is less acceptable, however, in the government places. So we see where private sectors are more acceptable as opposed to government entities.
All right, so there's an improvement. Still work to do. Thank you. Yes, Kerry.
So two things that I want to comment on, and I think the discussion is really robust discussion here. As it relates to teachers and their colonial ideologies. For example, Hordat Gentles would have spent quite some time looking at teacher education and the ways in which teacher educators have taught, their pedagogies, their practices, and their beliefs, and how those things combined would have influenced how teachers are trained and what they do and how they practice when they become teachers. So that is a critical part of the discussion that I also think that needs to be highlighted. As it relates to rules and classes and stuff like that, or what happens in the school context, again, for me, what is important is that we teach students how to assess and evaluate rules, not to tell them, oh, don't wear your hair of this style, but to help them to understand that they will exist or coexist in a pluralistic world. Some students will leave Jamaica upon completing secondary education. Some will leave before, and when they leave or when they exit the system at whatever point, they will be interacting with people of different values where rules are different. Even within our locale, our context, we have individuals who are not always wearing short hair, or let us say hair that is 1 inch long, whatever. We have individuals who are branching out based on their different fields. And so my advocacy really is for us to practice that social justice where people understand rules and the rationale behind rules, but also critically assess these rules and to make their respective decisions. Granted, we have to understand that there are some social constructs that exist, but if we continue to promote, and again, Leng said it in his introduction, the colonial ideologies, then it means that we will always adhere to that status quo and we will maintain it. We have to also have that transformation taking place within the schools so that when the students go out into the real world, they are not lost or they're not trying to fight battles that could have been fought through the education system, because education itself is a very powerful tool, and the system as well needs to make that push towards the change, not just wait on private sector to make the changes. Government, we know how government is. Government maintains colonial practices and beliefs. And if you don't believe me, check all of the processes in government. I work in government. Check government institutions. They maintain ideologies and practices from colonial heritage, really, and they don't push the boundaries to see how changes can really impact individual growth and productivity.
You're part of that deconstruct. I see you're growing your hair.
In fact, I am. In fact, I very much am. Outside of the outside of the personal reasons for doing it, I have decided to embark upon this journey. And because of the space within which I work and the need to challenge individuals' ideologies and practices about what well-groomed is, and again, because we become, and your panelist said it, that it is a strong word. It is oppression, really, to have people think that you cannot grow your hair, to have African people of African descent thinking that it is not just to grow your hair. It is not just to have locks. It is not just to have a fade at the side, etc. We have to challenge these things. And some challenges really take place on an individual level. They're called micro revolutions and micro rebellions. And some of us really have to push those things so that the system can understand that that change needs to happen.
I hear you, Mr. Clark. Let me check the chat, see what's been said here. Renard is saying, while it says that changes do occur over time, we ought to take into consideration the premise on which we lobby for change. It can't be that we want change because it suits us, because if so be the case, the dilemma of trying to please everyone will occur, and that is impossible. Then by saying, well, yes, just the other day I saw a guy with locks working within a bank, which really shows something. So there has been improvement in the system, the private sector, the BPO industry as well. So we see where there is a micro, and I don't know to what extent we may experience a macro evolution in terms of that. But certainly, I feel like some things don't affect anything. And I think sometimes, again, we need to understand what our concept of, discipline is, of professionalism is. Sometimes we're just cultured in a particular way, and we pass on these thoughts, ideas onto others without even questioning them. One of the things I reflected on I think months ago, I was sharing with somebody that even the whole, I don't know if it's still the case, but you sometimes in high schools, in some schools, males are even told that they are supposed to have a clean shave, like no beard, nothing. And I was like, based on my observation and even my own personal development, that we go through phases, and I feel like sometimes as males, we want to mark those developmental phases to say, all right, when I was in high school, this was the style I used to be. I used to just wear a little goatee right here. I'm talking about myself, actually. So used to just have this right here. And then I used to have my beard just very low until I was influenced to keep my beard. And I said, who knows? By the time I probably get to, I get older, I may cut off everything. I may, cornrow my hair, or I may cut off everything. So I think it's also a mark of transition from one stage to the next. And sometimes we need this space to explore ourselves, because I feel like the system stifles us at times. The reality is, as Security is saying, some of us are created to maintain the status quo, while there are those who will push for reform. And it's fine. It's totally fine if we want. There are those who want to, be a part of the revolution, or if you want to maintain the traditional sense of living. But I feel like in either case, both parties' decisions should be respected. Yes, Audley.
So, I want us to be clear in terms of how can we be specific in terms of what is oppressive, what is not oppressive, in terms of grooming. I understand. I think it makes no sense a student just growing beard has to take it off. But grooming the hair, for example, I'm not advocating for it. But what I am questioning now, if you have students able to do what they want to do with their hair, will you then have another rule that states, okay, females, you should have no more than 2 colors in your hair. Males, you should have no more than 2 colors in your hair. What if they want to have 3 or 4 colors? Wouldn't that still be oppressive? So the question is, how do we get specific in terms of what's not oppressive and what is oppressive? That's the first point. The second point is, I would mention again, it's not a matter of we think this helps you academically, but more so in our society where we are not very good law-abiding citizens, we have to try our best to control what we must so that we can teach the hidden curriculum. So those are my 2 points. And I'd like the first question to be answered.
Right. Thoughts on the second one. Right. Could you repeat the second thought again?
No, man. The second point was basically to summate the rationale of the schools. It's not that we believe it affects the academic performance, but in a society where we need persons to learn that we have to conform to certain rules because of how you may be judged, which you still will be judged, even though we're moving from that. That's just the rationale. We want students to understand that in society there are rules and we can't just relax every single rule, because even if we relax them and we have some other rule to that rule, wouldn't that still be oppressive?
Yeah, get your point now. So, but does this mean that if we relax this would affect certain other rules? Would this affect the adherence to other rules? And I feel like, again, we judge people that if they do not conform to these rules, then they are going to become lawbreakers. And I think we need to be careful of that premise that we set right there, because it's not affecting our learning. So why is it that we are so adamant that we are supposed to obey these grooming policies? Secondly, I want to go back to the point that Karif raised, and you are a teacher. I'm not sure what the rules were like when you were doing teacher education, but in our time in college, Karif and I studied at the same institution, we had to conform to this notion of what a teacher should look like. And it wasn't just a male thing. The ladies had to be careful of the type of nail polish that they wear, of the type of hairstyles that they had. And again, you're suggesting that the workplace should, evolve in its attitude, in its policy. But the truth is that it's our education that really influences what happens in our school system and by extension in the workplace. Because if we're cultured like this in the teacher training system, obviously we are going to transfer these values to our children, who eventually become the managers in the workspaces, and it's going to continue. So we have to start by deconstructing our approach to teacher education, or we prepare our teacher, they call those, our student teachers before they go into the system. And it was not until I was leaving college that there were some guys who came and they were adamant that they were not going to conform to this stupid rule. And that's how I realized the system kind of got relaxed till they were allowed to go and teach in practice with a high here. I was really drawn about, because in our time it could not happen. So,
but just my last point, Mr. Mada. Question: I had a group of third formers just before we had summer break, and I was speaking to them about rules. I told them honestly, I don't think it affects you any at all, but we're just teaching you to conform to rules, because rules are in society. And I asked the students, I said, you all see me in Junction and in Santa Cruz and in Manchester. We're one of the tightest spots. If I come in front to teach you in a pants taken in 5 inches, my pants below where it ought not to be, and I have been brown in my mohawk, would you respect me as a teacher? And there was a resounding no with all the third formers at Monroe College. And society is what dictates what is taught, because society is what emerges and then we teach based on that. Parents do not want a teacher with a too short skirt teaching their students with the tattoos showing. That's a societal problem. So we have to look at the social contract and then teach as such. The hidden curriculum is for students to get into this social contract. And that's the point. So I don't think it affects learning, but we have to be mindful of the social contract. The parents are responsible for students. And until the majority of parents want this to change, I don't think it will change up to the secondary level.
And I see your point. I'm not disagreeing with your point. I see your point. But I don't think the conversation is there. I think even though there is an advocacy for a revision of grooming policy, I think socially it is understood that a teacher is not going to the classroom with an excessively skinny pants.
Why?
Because why would you go to a class with all of your what do you call that? Your body being printed out.
Why should we be oppressed with grooming policies? That's what we're getting back to. How do we know what is oppressive and what is not oppressive? And that's the reason for the rules. We are not a law-abiding citizen. We have to get some things right first. And that's my claim.
And I knew this. I mean, I'm the host. I'm not debating the point. And I knew this is opposite. This is the contrary thought position to the matter of, okay, we ask for freedom, but to what extent is it practical? And I think this is one of the reasons we have resistance to certain things, because there may be a case where everybody's going to now say, all right, let me just do what I want to do. And this may now be problematic. Leng, did you want to come in? We're wrapping up. I think our time is up.
Yes, just adding quickly to the discussion. Mr. Fair was saying, where do we basically draw the line if we say if we decrease, how rigid the rules are as it pertains to hair and the dress code. But I think there are reasons that you can go and revise a constitution, because as we grow as people, there are different things that change over time. The culture evolves. And I just think that in doing so, what is important is to educate the people on what we're changing to and allow them to have an understanding. Even though, let's say, you're allowed to grow to here, there's a certain level of responsibility that comes with that power and certain levels of accountability. And I just believe that imparting that knowledge is important.
So are you saying that people are not asking for much? They just want, to be themselves. But in your observation, though, Sir Fear, do you see your boys wearing excessively tight pants to school? Do they design their hair in an excessive way, whatever that represents? Or is it modest?
Modest. Yeah, at Monroe College, I can say for most students, they do conform. At Monroe, most students do conform. There are a few students who don't, and even if they do wear tight pants, it's not too tight. But for the most part, they do conform. At other schools, though, there's a preponderance of non-conformity. So I don't think my experience in terms of the students I teach, it would be fair to generalize the entire system.
Okay. Right, we're going to raise the last point because our time is really up. But in terms of sorry, yes, Kerry, go ahead.
I just wanted to echo what Ling said about the rationale, and it came up in our discussion earlier as it relates to critical thinking. So, for example, the issue of colored hair, if we set a rule within our school context to say, you wear your natural hair color, then that is clear, your natural hair color. You're not saying that, all right, students are allowed to wear pink, blue, whatever, right? But if you're allowed to wear a natural hair color, then that is fine. As it relates to, for example, the tightness or the closeness of pants, last week, I saw an image where students were barred, two students were barred from school at Holland High School. And in my estimation, I don't think that the pants were tight. I would, however, say that the pants were fitted in terms of being appropriate for the boys' size, right? And how the garment suited their build, right? So we're not asking for any skinny jeans and whatever. I'm just saying, let us be very critical of the rules that we have in our schools and to be not so close-minded in terms of what we consider professionalism to be, because half of the time we don't explain to students the rules, half of the time we don't explain to parents the rules or the justification or rationale. I led a session recently with senior leaders in a particular school. And when I asked them, how often do you explain the rules to the students? And this was at the primary level. No teacher, over 11 teachers in that context, out of them, nobody indicated that they explained the rules to the students. And so this is what we continue to experience in the education system. We continue to promote rules and regulations that the students themselves do not understand. And until we promote a sense of inquiry into school rules, then it means that we're not going to go anywhere, because all we will be doing is that, again, and why I say it is oppressive because the other individual does not understand the justification for it. And if you continue to have these rules over individuals and they cannot justify or understand, it means that it is oppressing them because you're the only one who understands the rationale for the rule. And most times, most teachers don't understand the rationales for the rules.
All right, thank you very much. I'm not going to raise the next point. We've been here for a good while, but I really want to thank everyone, all the panelists, for your contribution to this wonderful conversation. I'm going to give you a moment shortly to give your final thoughts. Our own theme this evening of males and the education system. Javon Ling, one of our panelists from University of the West Indies. We have Mr. Audley Fair, a teacher at the Monroe College, Sandrine Morris, who is a law student at the University of the West Indies. And earlier, we had Mr. Brown, who also teaches at Monroe College. So, gentle folks, your final words on the matter, any aspect of it, of what we've discussed in this evening's forum as we wrap up. Javon, we start with you.
I guess I'll go first. So I just think there's a lot to be done. This is only the start of getting males to actually learn at a faster pace. I think there's a lot of measures that was discussed here that can be put in place, such as pedagogy. That's important, a point we looked at. And I think it's going to take time, but we can't just sit back. We have to actually act now. As it relates to the whole grooming policy, I believe that there should be some relaxation of what we deem acceptable. The whole fitted pants issue, I think that's important because a lot of schools emphasize that, hey, don't adjust your pants, but a pants that's this size for me as opposed to somebody else that's fat, there's a different fit, and we have to look into all of that. There should be some level of leniency. A lot more thought should be put into what we deem acceptable as a school and as parents, students involved. And we should also look at that it's not just the school administrators that make these policies. but you have parents and students who are stakeholders of these organizations that play a part, and that every voice and opinion matters, and we should take it into consideration. It was a lovely discussion, and I appreciate all the panelists that were here, especially the ones from Monroe. Sorry for the bias, but it was definitely a lovely discussion. And thank you for having me.
Our pleasure as well. Thank you so much, Javon, for your insightful contribution to this topic. I'm a slim fitted person. Yes, Audley, go ahead. Your final thoughts.
Final thoughts. Robust conversation. I think we need to have more conversations like this, many different forums. I must particularly commend for what the word uMbre means, understanding male biases, redefining expectations. It's lovely, it's on point. And I think if we have more civil discussions like these, we'll understand each other and we can call for more discussion to guide policy, because policy is what's important. Great discussion, keep it up.
Thank you very much, Mr. Fair. And yeah, big up uMbre, really lovely name. And thank you so much for sharing from your experience and adding richly to the conversation. And Sandrine. Ms. Morris?
Okay, I'm going to have to keep my camera off because the data is going. I don't know. It's not accommodating both video and audio. However, I think I agree with Audley that we need to have more conversations of this nature, and not only with our young people. Yes, we have to have a lot with our young people and get the collective thoughts, but also we need to have it with the policymakers, because I believe that a lot needs to be done in terms of changing policies going forward, so that our boys can have the best experiences possible, and especially as it relates to our primary school boys, because yes, we're seeing where things are getting better slightly in the high school and tertiary at the tertiary level, but at those formative years, when they're in primary and prep school, I believe a lot of changes need to be done there in regards to what we do from home and in regards to what we do from the point of the ministry or from the government. So I think, we're getting slightly better, but there is a lot more to be done, and it needs to be done fast. And as it relates to the grooming now, I just think both the academic world and the professional world needs to get up to speed and move away from that type of colonial thought. I'm not against rules, but I just think that there's some of the rules that need to be changed, to be honest.
There you have it from Ms. Morris. Thank you so much. Thank you to everybody who joined, who participated. Karif, thank you so much for your contribution. Edward, thanks for being here. It's 2:10 in the morning in France, and we appreciate your presence. Coy, Yvonne, Dante, Lisson, Kelleron, Renard, thank you so much for being here. Our next forum is going to be on Sunday, September 25, where we'll be looking at men and dating, how to approach a woman. This is one that we want to see you back at, and we want you to be a part of our promotion as well. So these will be circulated on our social media handles, and we will keep you posted. Have a wonderful evening and night, and have a wonderful week ahead. Catch you. Bye-bye.